Alright guys, so everything is going off the rails and welcome back to your end of the world update. The level of chaos is just ramping up. Putin is now doubling down on the war effort and we can expect new levels of escalation. This is, of course, in response to the West's idea of missile strikes deep into Russia. The US is still mulling over this, but Putin is moving ahead to bolster the entire Russian army. Very soon, Russia's troops will reach 1.5 million soldiers, the second largest after China. According to the readout, Russia is on guard against massive escalation on various fronts. We now need to form new structures and military units to secure security in the northwest since Finland, which we border, has joined the NATO bloc. We need to increase the number of troops. So either Putin knows something that we don't, or Russia is now on high alert. And whether you like Russia or not, we mustn't dismiss the warning Putin issued a while earlier.
Стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией.
This mobilization is a big warning to the West that we have the manpower and we have the resources to fight on. Now, there are many analysts out there saying that Russia can't justify the expense of raising new troops, that the defense budget is a big financial drain and this will hurt the Russian economy. In 2024, Putin will be spending almost 29% of the entire budget on national defense. That's 10.7 trillion rubles, more than $100 billion. However, the rest of the federal budget for housing, education, and healthcare is also heading up as well this year. So the defense allocation isn't really crippling the rest of the economy, it will be business as normal. Why can Russia afford to boost their military budget, right? This is something that we all need to ask and something that the West needs to understand. Because their revenue this year is expected to increase by more than a third. Energy sales are still going strong. And if you're the West, this is terrifying for you. The battle for attrition isn't just on the ground, it's on your economy as well. If Russia ups the ante, you have to throw more chips on the poker table as well. Understand that the sanctions on Russian oil, they have failed. That was the main mechanism, right? The big plate of spaghetti the West threw on the wall. That isn't working. We know what has happened. The world, especially BRICS, and even Europe itself can't break away from Russian energy. This chart shows us how the oil sanctions are collapsing in real time. Really pay attention to this. The squeeze on Russian revenues is coming to an end. When the West punished Russian oil 2 years back, it caused the discount of Russian barrels to reach over $30 versus Brent, and this meant Putin's revenues took a massive hit for a few months. Then came the oil price cap in December and in 2023. That caused the discount to widen as well. But this year, Russia has flipped the situation. They have figured out ways to get their oil to the markets while reducing the discount. It's now less than $5 a barrel. Russia can most definitely afford this budget and their mobilization. Now, I want to be clear, another mobilization by Putin is going to force the West to double down as well. They can't afford to back down, not right now. It just challenges the entire narrative. Despite the EU being economic trouble and the US national debt heading basically to the stratosphere, pride is going to force them to go all in. In the Aspen Security Conference, Blinken hinted that future administrations beyond Biden will continue the fight.
Any administration has to ask hard questions. If we stop, if we reverse ourselves, if we let Ukraine down, what will Putin do? He will then really resume the aggression and possibly have a chance of succeeding where, for now, he's failed. He won't stop at Ukraine. He's likely to go at other countries in the region, including NATO allies and other would-be aggressors far afield from Ukraine, far afield from Europe. They're taking lessons from this.
The problem with war spending is that it affects all of us. When Russia ramps up spending, when the US ups the ante, it floods the entire market with a ton of money. It keeps inflation high and explodes the national debt. To date, the US has provided $55.7 billion in military assistance since the war began 2 years back. But that's just the money being sent so far. The total bill is far bigger. In total, Congress has passed 5 bills totaling $175 billion. The latest amount raised was over 61 billion, and this is money going mainly to the military industrial complex. And we haven't even factored in the EU yet. It's going to the people right at the top, and what do they do with the money? They buy a ton of assets, and that drives prices up even higher. So if you're wondering why things like stocks and gold are rising higher, war spending is really a serious factor. You are expanding the money supply and it's flowing to the few instead of the many. This is part of fiscal dominance and is supporting prices even higher. There's a reason why the IMF is re-engaging Russia at this point. They have considered Russia's economic situation as more or less settled. They are even planning a visit to Moscow, which means they don't expect a collapse and that Russia's growth will continue for quite a while longer, for a very long time. While the West is struggling to contain Russia, they are also fighting another economic battle. The G7 is fighting another war of financial attrition with China. And this all centers around supply chains. We have said many times that Beijing's advantage goes beyond just cheap energy from Russia. They have an entire ecosystem that's geared towards manufacturing and industry. In a report, the West, they are waving the white flag. They are trying to break China's dominance of rare earths, minerals needed for everything from EVs to military weapons. But China controls at least 70% of the global production. They are decades ahead. The G7, they are racking their brains. They are figuring out that playing catch up is nearly impossible now. Imagine you are the US. Your plan is to maintain economic hegemony. We all know that it's nothing new. And to do that, you must reshore your industries back. Now, during the election, Kamala has made it very clear the agenda going forward.
Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
But riddle me this, how are you going to build a clean energy economy without critical minerals? How can you build affordable cars without control of the supply chains? You can't have one without the other. Since 2018, the demand for rare earths has flown to the moon. Thanks to the EV and semiconductor race, the whole world needs a ton of rare earths for production. But China dominates the entire landscape, the entire supply chain, plus the refining of rare earths. Is not even close. Beijing's production is 6 times bigger than the US, and that gives Chinese industries a tremendous advantage. It's a big reason why Chinese EVs are the most affordable in the world. It's also another reason why China won't lose the chips war. Production and research are magnitudes cheaper versus the G7. And here's the big challenge. Can the West endure the financial pain? How much money can they throw to build their supply chains without going bankrupt? Because if they can't, manufacturing will still be in China's hands. This is a good example of how long it takes for rare earths project to get profitable. Japan invested in Australia's Lynas rare earths processing plant back in 2011, but this took Japan 8 long years before production could ramp up and turn a profit. The entire project was a money pit for over a decade before it could become sustainable. Can the US withstand a decade of continuous investment without return? And even if output comes online, costs will still be higher compared to China's production, simply because of inflation and labor costs. Remember that this will be done under fire as well. Firstly, interest rates are much higher in the West. Secondly, China could always flood the market with supply and drive US projects underwater. Beijing can always make their industries fight a margin war with US producers. Just like how the US protects the dollar, China will also protect their industrial dominance. And speaking of which, Germany is a clear example of what happens when you don't control your supply chain. German companies are running to China. Despite the decoupling narrative, industries are setting up factories and production plants in the Far East. German automakers are still flocking there. The figures are really astounding. It shows us that the new manufacturing hub, the center of industry, is still in China. If anything, Beijing is industrializing even faster. In Q1 this year, German direct investments into China hit nearly 2.5 billion euros. Q2 was 4.8 billion. And this brings the total investments to 7.3 billion in just the first half of this year. That's more than the entire FDIs in 2023. And the biggest investors are ironically German automakers. When companies move to China, they bring more than just capital. They provide employment to Chinese workers. Realize the big rebuke happening. Even though the EU is about to punish EVs made in China, German car makers, they are ignoring this. They have to manufacture in China. If you manufacture a car in China, in a Chinese factory, you'll be punished. Imports to Europe will be subjected to a big tariff, anywhere from 9% to a whopping 36%, and that is on top of the existing 10% import tax. But Western companies would rather just endure the tariffs. They need to build EVs in China not just for the EU market, but for the global economy. And it's all about getting as close as possible to the center of the supply chain. You build in China and you export out to the world. This is the business model of the present and for the foreseeable future. China's supply chain goes beyond just being a producer and refiner of critical minerals. Take cobalt for example. This is an input needed to make EVs. China controls 76% of global cobalt production. That's impressive, but Beijing goes beyond that. The majority of supply comes from Congo. China doesn't just buy what they need, they are stockpiling the mineral like crazy. In 2023, Beijing stockpiled over 8,000 tons of cobalt, and in 2024, they are expected to hoard another 5,000 tons. Best of all, this is when cobalt prices collapsed last year. So China is securing critical supplies at rock bottom prices. This lowers the cost of manufacturing and prevents any supply side shocks. This is the level of complexity, the level of coordination the West is facing. This is the level of competition. To build your supply chains to rival China, throwing money just isn't enough. You'll just create bigger debt and deficits. And until the West figures it out, manufacturing will still be dominated by Beijing. Like it or not, made in China is still very much a thing. The future of industry is flowing from the West to the East. Now pay attention to this chart. It shows the change of jobs in the German economy, basically the extent of the bloodbath. In just 12 months, Germany lost over 100,000 manufacturing jobs. The only growth sectors were service industries like healthcare and hospitality. Even construction is down because costs are much higher in Europe. And that's why the upcoming EU China trade war is so devastating. Countries like Germany could deindustrialize further if Beijing throws their own tariffs. So if you think inflation is over, better think twice. The longer the hot war and the economic war continues, the more money will be borrowed and printed into oblivion. But let me know what you think. Can Russia afford their defense budget? And can the West really challenge China's supply chain dominance? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.